We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Hey Amud Aleph in Meseches Bava Metzia. This is Bava Metzia Daf 35a. On the previous Amud, Rav Huna said that if a shomer says he's going to pay for the item instead of taking a shvuah to exempt himself, he still does have to take a shvuah she'ena b'reshuso. He has to take a shvuah that it's not in his possession because we're afraid maybe he likes the item and he's just trying to find a way to get the item. So he says, I'll pay for it, and in that way, he's going to keep the item. And the Gemara is now in the middle of asking a question from a Mishnah in Shavuos on what Rav Huna said. The Mishnah in Shavuos says, let's say you have a situation of a malva who takes collateral and he loses the collateral. He admits that he loses the collateral, but he says that the collateral wasn't really worth as much as the loan, and so therefore the lova, the borrower, still owes him money. The borrower does admit that he owes money, but he doesn't admit that he owes as much as the malva is saying that he owes. So essentially the lova here is a moda b'miksas, and also over here the malva is a shomer on the collateral, and the malva is essentially admitting he's basically paying and saying that he lost the collateral. And so the Mishnah said in Meseches Shavuos, the Mishnah said that even though the lova is really the one who should be taking the shvuah, because the lova here is the moda b'miksas, but we're afraid that maybe the lova will take a shvuah in terms of how much the collateral was worth, and then the malva is going to take out the collateral and show that what the lova said was wrong, and that's going to disqualify the lova from being a witness in future cases. He won't be able to swear in future cases, and so therefore the Mishnah says it's better that we give the malva the shvuah instead of the lova. And so now the Gemara is saying this actually presents a problem for Rav Huna, because if you're going to say Isa l'd Rav Huna, if you're going to say that what Rav Huna said was correct, and Rashi explains Isa l'd Rav Huna, shahashomer hameshalim damim, if you're going to say that the shomer who says that he's going to pay money still nishba she'ena b'reshu, so he still needs to take a shvuah that the item is not in his possession, so why are we concerned the malva might take out the collateral and then show that the lova's shvuah was false? Didn't he swear that he doesn't have the item? Because again, Rav Huna said there's a shvuah she'ena b'reshu, so it's exactly the same case. The malva has this collateral that he's claiming that he lost, and according to Rav Huna, we should say that he has to take a shvuah she'ena b'reshu. So that's why the Gemara again says, if it's Isa l'd Rav Huna, for what Rav Huna said was correct, Kevon de mishtabe malva she'ena b'reshu, so once the lender takes a shvuah, it's not in his reshus, how is he going to take it out? And therefore, what would be the problem with giving the lova the shvuah? And again, it should really be the lova who takes the shvuah, because the lova in this case was the moda b'miksas. And the Gemara says, Amar Rava says, and the Mesoros Hashas changes it to Amar Rabba, that Rabba says, the Hagos Habach changes it to Amar Rava, Amar Rav Yosef. Rava says that Rav Yosef says, in any case, he answers as follows, Sheyesh Edim Shenisrafa. The case over here is that there are actually witnesses that the item was burned, and Rashi says, Sheyesh Edim Shenisrafa, the Hash Delosh Binu. The case over here is there were Edim that it was burned, therefore there's no reason to give him a shvuah that it's not in his reshus. It's obvious it's not in his reshus. Sharei Hevi Edim, because he's already brought witnesses that it's not in his reshus. Now this answer doesn't make any sense. The Gemara says, if so, if there are Eidim that it was burned, so mehechim aisila, so what's even the concern that he's going to show the item and show that the lova's shvuah was false? The whole point over here is that the lova doesn't take the shvuah because we're afraid the malva will then take out the item, he'll take out the collateral, so it doesn't make any sense to say that witnesses say it was burned. Elamar Rav Yosef, rather Rav Yosef says, sheyesh Eidim shenigneva, there were witnesses that it was stolen, so again, seems to be the same kind of answer. No point in taking a shvuah, it's not in his reshus, if Eidim say it's not in his reshus. And so the Gemara asks the same question again. But still at the end, how are we ever concerned from where would the lender ever take out the item if there are witnesses that it was stolen? And the Gemara says to that, the Tarachu Maisila, no, there still is a concern because we're afraid he's going to take the bother to pursue the thief and he'll be able to show it, and therefore we don't want the lova to take a shvuah. But the Gemara says, well, if that's your concern, if so, even let's say the lender takes the shvuah, litrach lova v'leisi, maybe we should be concerned that the borrower will go and take the bother and find the ganav and produce the item. And the Gemara says to that, that's not a concern. It's only a concern in one direction. I understand the lender. He knows who came into his house, who goes out of his house. So he'll be able to go and pursue the ganav and be able to bring forth the item. But when it comes to the borrower, the malva, does he know who went in and out of the house of the lender? So therefore, there's not really a concern that the borrower will produce the item, and therefore, again, we say that the malva takes the shvuah. And the Gemara continues with another answer. Abaya says, Gezerah, the decree over here is, the reason why we want the lender to take the shvuah and not the borrower is because we're concerned, the Shema Yiton V'yomar, that maybe he will claim and say, V'yomar lo achar shvuah mitzasiyah, he'll just simply say, yeah, I did take a shvuah because I thought it was not in my reshus, but then I found it. So there really is such a concern. Even if he takes a shvuah she'ena b'reshuso like Rav Huna, we still have a concern that he might produce the item because he'll say he found it afterwards. And again, that's why we give the malva the shvuah and not the lova. And the Gemara continues, Rav Ashi says, Zen nishba v'zen nishba. They actually both take a shvua. What Rav Huna said is correct. There is a shvua she'ena b'reshuso, and it goes as follows. Zen nishba she'ena b'reshuso. This one swears that it's not in his reshus. V'zen nishba kama hayashava. And then actually the lova is the one that swears how much it was worth. So in other words, according to Rav Ashi, it doesn't mean to say that the lender is the one that takes the shvua in terms of how much the collateral is worth. No, the borrower still takes the shvua how much the collateral is worth, but we want the lender, it's exactly what Rav Huna said. We want the lender to take a shvua first that it's not in his reshus. V'hachi kamar, and this is what the Mishnah is saying. Mi nishba techila, who's the one that is the first one to take the oath? Malva nishba techila, the lender takes the first oath. Shema yishav hazeh, because we're afraid otherwise what might happen is the borrower will take his oath first, v'yotze haloas hapikadon, and then the other person will take out, the malva will produce the pikadon, and again that could create a problem. And the Gemara continues, Rav Huna bar Tachlifa Mishmei de Rava Amar. Rav Huna bar Tachlifa says in the name of Rava, Reisha de Seifa Tiyufta Rav Huna. The beginning of the end part of the Mishnah is actually a refutation of Rav Huna, because what does it say at the beginning of the end of the Mishnah? It says, Sela Hilvi Sani Olav. It says, let's say the borrower says that he lent me one sela, but Shtayim Hayashava. The borrower says he lent me one sela, but the collateral I gave him is actually worth two sela, and therefore the lender owes me money, the lender owes the borrower money. V'halo Omer, and the lender says, Lo ki ala Sela Hilvi Sicha Olav. He says, no, I lent you a sela, and sela hayashava, you just gave me a collateral worth a sela, so I don't owe you anything. So it said over there in the Mishnah Potter, it said that the lender is Potter. The reason why he's Potter is because he's essentially a kofer bakol. The borrower is saying that you owe me money, and the lender is saying I don't owe you anything. And so the Gemara says, Vim isla de Rav Huna. Now, if it's true what Rav Huna said, that when a person is a shomer, he has to take a shvua she'ena b'reshuso, he has to take a shvua that it's not in his possession. So migo de mishtava malva she'ena b'reshuso. So once the malva, the lender, is already taking a shvua that it's not in his reshus, so there's a concept of gilgul shvua, even though technically a kofer bakol does not take a shvua, but here you should just roll in another shvua. L'shtava nami a gilgul shvua. He should take another shvua through the process of gilgul shvua, kama hayashava, how much it is worth. And so therefore it seems like Rav Huna is wrong. There is no shvua she'ena b'reshuso, because if there was a shvua she'ena b'reshuso, there should be a concept of gilgul shvua over here. And the Gemara says to that, Amar Rav Ashi says, Amrisa l'shmaita kami de Rav Kahana. I said this over in front of Rav Kahana, v'amar li, and he said to me, tehei b'ma'amino. He said to me, the idea is over here that we're talking in our Mishnah, we're talking about a case where he trusts him, meaning to say, the borrower trusts the lender and never made him take a shvua she'ena b'reshuso. And since he never made the lender take a shvua she'ena b'reshuso, there is no concept of gilgul shvua. But you're right, had it been a situation where the borrower would not have trusted the lender, and the lender would have taken a shvua she'ena b'reshuso, then yes, we would have applied the rule of gilgul shvua. And the Gemara continues, v'nehemne lova l'mal v'nami b'ha. But once the borrower is already trusting the lender, saying you don't need to take a shvua she'ena b'reshuso, so then why not trust him also in terms of how much the collateral was worth? Kama havashava, he should trust him in terms of this issue of kama havashava, how much the collateral was worth. And to that the Gemara says, lo kimle begave. The Gemara says, well, the lender doesn't really know what the collateral was worth. The collateral was owned by the borrower and was given to the lender, and that's why the borrower doesn't trust the lender in that regard. And the Gemara says, well, if there's trust in one direction, then malva lelova. Why doesn't the malva trust the lova to kimle begave? Because the lova does know what the collateral was worth. So why is the lender so suspicious of the evaluation that the borrower is giving? And the Gemara says simply lo mehemenle. The Gemara says simply that the lender doesn't trust the borrower, even though the borrower trusts the lender. And the Gemara says umayshna lova de mehemenle lamalva. But what's the difference? Why does a borrower in general trust the malva, trust the lender? Umayshna malva de lo mehemenle lelova. And what's the difference that a lender does not trust the borrower? And the Gemara says to that, lova mekayim be b'malva tumas yisharim tanchem. The lova, he feels that the malva is somebody who the pasuk applies to when the pasuk says that the integrity of the upright shall guide them, meaning to say he believes the lender must be a person of integrity. That's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave him money to lend out. On the other hand, malva mekayim be belova, the malva, his attitude towards the lova is, his attitude towards the borrower is, as the pasuk says, v'selef bogdim yeshadim, that the perverseness of the faithless shall destroy them. The idea being that the lova must not be a person of integrity. That's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes it that this lova has to borrow from other people. As Rashi explains, lova mekayim be b'malva mikrazet tumas yisharim tanchem. The lova applies that pasuk to the malva, which means to say, im lo she'adam neman v'yasher, if not for the fact that this person was a trustworthy, straight individual, lo hayu ma'asher oso min hashamayim, they wouldn't have made him wealthy from the heavens. Shenemar tumas yisharim tanchem. That's what he understands from the pasuk of tumas yisharim tanchem. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Hahu gavra da afked kipe gabe chavre. There was an individual who deposited jewels by his friend. Amar le havle kipe. He said, "Give me back my jewels." Amar le lo yadana hechos vinu. He said, "I don't know where I put them." Also, Lakamid Rav Nachman, he came before Rav Nachman Amar Lei, said to him, Kol lo yadan, anytime someone says, I don't know where I put it, pshiyusahi, that's considered negligence, and so therefore you're chayiv to pay. Zil shalim, go and pay him. Lo shilim, so the person did not pay. Also, Rav Nachman agve lafande minei. Rav Nachman went and he took away his palace. He essentially repossessed the person's palace in order to pay off this debt for the jewels. L'sof ishtakach kipi. In the end, he actually found the jewels, v'ikor, and they had actually gone up in value. And so now the question was, who gets that increase in value? Amar Rav Nachman said, Hadri kipi l'marayu. The kipi, the jewels, should go back to their original owner, and the original owner should benefit from the increase in value. V'hadraf adna l'mara, and the mansion should go back to its original owner, because now that he's paying off the debt, he gets back what was repossessed. Amar Rava says, Havi Yisivna Kamed Rav Nachman. I was sitting before Rav Nachman. Upirkin Hamafkid Haven. We were learning this parak of Hamafkid. So V'yamri, so I said to him, Shilaim velo ratzali shava. Isn't this exactly the case of a shomer who decides to pay and not swear? And we said the halacha was that once a shomer decides to pay, so then he becomes like the owner of the item, and that's why he's entitled to the kefil. Let's say they find the ganif. So if he becomes the owner of the item, shouldn't he get the increase in value of the item as well? Velo ahaderli. But then Rava said that Rav Nachman did not respond to me when I asked him this question. V'shaper Rava de lo ahaderli, and he was correct in not responding to me because it wasn't a good question. Because my time, and because what's the reason we say that if a person pays, he gets a certain ownership over the item? Hasam lo atrache leveidina, because there he didn't make him go to court. He essentially volunteered to pay, so that's why he's entitled to this kind of possession of the item. But over here, atrache leveidina, he made the person go to court, and now the person had to actually repossess. He had to collect the debt by going through the court. So in that situation, you're not going to say that he has any ownership over the item. So again, what happens is he gives the jewels with the increased values that goes back to the original owner, and of course he gets back his mansion. And the Gemara continues, L'meimra desavar Rav Nachman d'shuma hadar. But does that mean to say that Rav Nachman holds that an evaluation actually does get to go back? What that means to say is we evaluated the mansion in order to pay off the debt, but then he found the jewels, so he paid off the debt with the jewels, and then he gets back, that's shuma hadar, he gets back what was repossessed. Is that really true that we say you're able to get back what was taken from you to pay off a debt if you just get the funds and pay off what you need to pay off? And the Gemara says, no, over there, Shani Hasam, it's different over there, meaning it's different in this case, he's able to get back his mansion, the Shuma Betos have it, because here the whole evaluation was clearly a mistake, because really he had the jewels all along, and so therefore this is a completely different scenario than the standard case of Shuma Hadar. And the Gemara continues, Amri Nahardoi, they say in Nahardoi, Shuma Hadar ad Tresa Yarche Shasa, that a Shuma, an evaluation, can be returned to the original owner for 12 months of a year. V'yamar Ameimar, and Ameimar said, Anami Nahardoi, I am from Nahardoi, Usvirli, and I hold Shuma Hadar Liolam, that the Shuma, the item that's been evaluated to pay off the debt, can go back to its original owner forever, as long as the owner pays back the debt. V'hilchas, and the halacha is, Shuma Hadar Liolam, the Shuma goes back forever. Misham Shenamar, because the pasuk says, V'yasisa hayashar v'atov, you have to do what is good, you have to do what is straight and what is good, meaning to say, essentially, almost go beyond the letter of the law, and you should return to the person his item if he pays off the debt. And the Gemara continues, Pshita is obvious, Shamulei lebal chov. Let's say they do an evaluation for a creditor, meaning a creditor needs to collect his debt from the borrower, and the borrower doesn't pay, so they evaluate the borrower's property, and they repossess that property and give it to the creditor. Now, if that creditor, now that creditor goes along, and he owes money to a different creditor, and so now that property is evaluated and given to the second creditor, the creditor of the creditor. So now the original owner of the property wants to get it back, he wants to pay off his debt. Amrina lei, we tell that second creditor, lo adif at migavra de asas mine, you're no better than the person you're coming from. Meaning, just like the borrower could get back his land from his creditor, so too he can get back the land from the creditor of his creditor, because that second creditor is no more powerful than the first creditor. And the Gemara continues, Zavna ursa v'yava b'matana. Let's say the creditor repossesses the land, again taking it for his debt, and then either he sells the land, or let's say he bequeaths it to somebody as a Yerusha, or let's say he gives it to somebody as a gift, and now the original owner wants to try to get back the property, so that he cannot do. Certainly these people that are receiving the land, whether it be a purchaser, somebody who's inheriting the land, or somebody who receives it as a gift, they are thinking that they're getting the land. They're not getting the land thinking that they're really just getting money, that this original person who owes the money gives cash, and now he's able to get back the land. That is not the case. They're allowed to keep the property. And the Gemara continues, Shamu lo le'isha v'insava. Let's say they evaluate a piece of property for a woman, meaning to say she's the creditor, she takes possession of the property for a debt that she's owed, and then she gets married. Now the person who originally owned the property wants to get it back essentially from her husband. Or let's say, O shamu mina de'isha v'insava. Or let's say they evaluate property from the woman. She's the one that owes the money. They take property from her, and then she gets married, v'mesa, and then she dies. And in that situation, the husband is trying to get back the property that they took from her. So the halach is Baal b'nechsei ishto lokeach have. The husband, when it comes to the property of his wife, is considered to be like a buyer. He's a lokeach, and so therefore lo mahadir. Therefore, the property, let's say the property that she took, doesn't have to go back to the original owner. That the husband's allowed to keep. V'lo mahadrin on lei. But on the other hand, let's say he's trying to get back the property, we don't return the property to him. And Rashi explains v'insava, again, she takes this property and then she gets married. Afilu lo shamatan lebala b'chsubasa. Now, even if she didn't write this property up that it belongs to the husband in her ksuba, lios nichsei tzon barzel, to be what we call nichsei tzon barzel, shein kenuyin lebal, which the husband completely owns. Elik vasan liatzma. Let's say she holds this property for herself, lios nichsei milug, that it's considered what we call nichsei milug. Hakeren shalah, where the principal belongs to her, v'abalo chelperos, and the husband just gets the fruits of the property. But bal b'nichsei milug shalishto, but the halacha is that a husband in the nichsei milug of his wife, lokeachav, is considered like a buyer. Din lokeach nasnu bo chacham is considered like a buyer. So hilkach, therefore, lo mahadir, number one, he doesn't have to return the property. Let's say the debtor comes and tries to pay off the debt, and he wants to get the property back. The husband doesn't have to give it back, because he's like a lokeach. In a case, again, where they evaluated for her, she collected it, then she got married, she died, and her husband inherited her. Like we say, when you buy property, you're thinking you want the land. You're not thinking that someone's going to come along and pay back a debt and get back the land, so he doesn't have to give back the land. And on the other hand, v'lo mahadrin alei, we also don't return the property to him. Let's say the property of the wife was possessed because she owed money to someone. He's not able to get it back. Let's say they evaluated it from her, v'insava, and then she married a husband, v'mason, she died, v'yar shabal, and her husband inherited her. Now what he wants to do is pay off the debt and get back the land. Lo matzi lememar yorshani. He can't say, well, I'm her heir. He's not able to say that. He's just like a buyer. He's not like a yorish, and therefore he doesn't have that ability to get back the property, even though, again, normally in a situation a debtor is able to get back his original property, but here a buyer would not be able to do that. And the Gemara continues and demonstrates that a husband is considered like a buyer of the property. D'amar Rav Yossi bar Chanina, because Rav Yossi bar Chanina said, "Bu'usha hiskinu, in Usha they made a takana. Ha'isha shemachra b'nichsei milug b'chay bala." Let's say a wife sells her nichsei milug while her husband is alive. V'meisa, and then she dies. Habal motzi miyad ha'lekuchos. The husband is able to get the property back from the lekuchos, from those who bought it. And Rashi explains, Ha'isha shemachra b'nichsei milug lios habal ochel peros b'chayeha. Let's say a wife sells her nichsei milug, that the husband will continue to have the fruits of the property while she's alive. But then she wants the actual property to go to the lokeach when she dies, and then she dies. The halach is bal motzi. The halach is the husband is able to take the property from the lekuchos. He can take guf hakarka miyad lekuchos. He can take the property from the lekuchos. That's what we say in Meseches ksubas. Takonas usha begufa shel karka. The takonas usha was on the property itself, la'achar misa, after the death, after the woman dies. Again, the husband is able to take the property. Alma kilokeach shavinu rabbanon. You see that the husband is considered like a buyer. V'amar lein, he can say to the other buyer, ani lakachti rishon, I'm like the first buyer. Di'ika shar yorei shavinu rabbanon. Now, if you're going to say that the husband is just like an heir, like somebody who inherits from his wife, so then the halacha is yorei shemachar avav nechasu b'chayav. If an heir, let's say the yorish's father sells property, the father sells property while he's still alive, so ein lo yerusha behen. Of course, we say that the heir is not able to inherit that property. Let's say somebody sells property and then he dies. You don't say that the sons can get that property from the buyer. Of course, you wouldn't say that by a yorish. But in this case, the husband is not simply considered to be a yorish of the wife. He's considered to be a lokeach, and he's considered to be the lokeach rishon, so he can take it away from the other buyers. Be'usha hiskinu, they made this takon, and Usha, Rashi says, Kishayis Sanhedrin Be'usha, this is when the Sanhedrin was in Usha. Shagolsa v'yashva sham Sanhedrin Gedola, because there was an exile, the Sanhedrin had to exile themselves to that area. Kedamrin b'Rosh Hashanah gabe asar masos. That's what we say in Meseches Rosh Hashanah, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Hey Amud Beis.